I came back from getting ice and found my 6-year-old daughter sitting in the hallway, barefoot, sobbing. Her little feet were red from the cold tile. Lucy had been out there for 3 hours. Through the door, I could hear my family laughing inside. When I demanded answers, my sister Brittany opened the door and coldly stated, "The room is just for family." Behind her, my parents nodded in agreement. My world shattered as I realized this wasn't an accident. This was planned cruelty. I dropped the ice bucket and scooped Lucy into my arms. She was shivering, her small body trembling against mine. Her cheeks were stained with dried tears, and when she looked at me, the confusion in her eyes broke something inside me. "Mommy, I just wanted a snack," she whispered. Aunt Brittany said I had to wait outside. I pushed past Brittany into the hotel room. My parents sat on the couch, drinks in hand, looking completely unbothered. My sister's husband, Craig, stood by the window, and their 2 kids, Mason and Harper, were watching television like nothing had happened. "What is wrong with you people?" My voice came out stronger than I felt. "She's 6 years old. You locked her out for 3 hours?" Brittany crossed her arms, that familiar smirk playing at her lips. She'd perfected that look over 38 years of being our parents' favorite. We wanted quality time with real family. "Lucy can entertain herself. She's old enough." "Real family?" I stared at my mother. "Mom, did you hear what she just said?" My mother, Diane, wouldn't meet my eyes. She took a sip of her wine and waved her hand dismissively. "You're being dramatic, Megan. She's fine. You're always so sensitive about everything." My father, Thomas, set down his newspaper. His voice was cold, measured, exactly how I remembered from every childhood disappointment. "We paid for this vacation. We decide who stays in which rooms. If you don't like it, you're welcome to make other arrangements." I looked down at Lucy, still clinging to me. Her bare feet dangled, probably numb from the cold tile. I'd brought her on this trip, thinking it would be good for her to spend time with her grandparents, her aunt and uncle and cousins. Her father had died 4 years ago in a construction accident. She barely remembered him. This family was all she had. And they treated her like garbage. "Fine," I said, my jaw tight. "We're leaving. Right now." Brittany's smirk widened. "Sure you are." I carried Lucy back to our room, 2 doors down from theirs. I set her on the bed and went to grab my purse for my phone, my wallet, my car keys. I'd call a rideshare, pack our bags, and we'd drive the 6 hours back home tonight. I didn't care that it was almost 9 o'clock. We were done. But when I opened my purse, my stomach dropped. Everything was gone. My wallet, my phone, my car keys, even my credit cards that I usually kept in the side pocket. I dumped the purse out on the bed. Nothing. Just some receipts and a pack of gum. A knock on the door made me jump. When I opened it, Brittany stood there, dangling my belongings from her perfectly manicured fingers. "Looking for these?" I reached for them, but she pulled back. "How did you get those?" "You left your purse in our room earlier, remember? When you went to get ice. I was just keeping them safe." Her smile was poison. "Here's the thing, little sister. Everything for this trip was booked and paid in my name. The rooms, the rental car, all of it. You came here on my dime. You leave when I say you leave." Craig appeared behind her. He adjusted his expensive watch and gave me that lawyer smile he probably used in court. "Also, Megan, I'd be careful about making any scenes, or, say, abandoning this family vacation. We've documented everything. We have photos of Lucy playing in the hallway. She looks pretty happy in them, actually. If you were to leave abruptly or make accusations, well, we'd have to question whether you're providing a stable environment for her." My hands started shaking. "You're insane. Both of you." "We're practical," Brittany said. She tossed my phone onto the bed, but kept everything else. "You can have this back. No password, though. I changed it. And I'll keep your wallet and keys safe until we're all ready to leave together, as a family." They walked away, and I heard their laughter echo down the hallway. I sat on the bed next to Lucy, who had finally stopped crying. She looked up at me with those big brown eyes that were so much like her father's. "Are we going home, Mommy?" I pulled her close, my mind racing. We were trapped. No money, no transportation, no way to call for help. And if I tried to fight back, they'd use it against me in ways I was only beginning to understand. Not yet, baby, I whispered. But soon. I promise. That night, I lay awake while Lucy slept beside me. My family had just shown me exactly who they were. This wasn't just casual cruelty. This was calculated. They'd planned this, prepared for my reaction, and boxed me in completely. But why? What did they want? The answer came the next evening. I spent the next day playing along. I smiled at breakfast. I didn't make a scene. I kept Lucy close to me every single second, not letting her out of my sight. Brittany watched us with amusement, like we were performing in a play she'd written. At lunch by the pool, I tried to borrow a phone from the hotel staff. The young woman at the towel station looked uncomfortable. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we were told you're going through some difficulties. We can't get involved in family matters." I felt my face flush. "Who told you that?" She wouldn't answer, just handed me towels and turned away. Brittany had gotten to them first. She'd poisoned any potential allies before I'd even thought to look for them. That evening, we were forced into a family dinner at the resort's upscale restaurant. I had to dress Lucy in the nice outfit I'd packed, comb her hair, and pretend everything was fine. The whole meal, Brittany kept her phone out, taking photos and videos. Every time I spoke, every gesture I made, she captured it. "Making memories," she said with that smile. After dinner, while Diane took Lucy and the other kids to get ice cream, my father asked me to walk with him on the beach. The sun was setting, painting everything orange and gold. Under other circumstances, it would have been beautiful. "You're probably wondering what this is all about," Thomas said. He didn't look at me, just stared out at the water. The thought had crossed my mind. "I'm 76 years old, Megan. I've been thinking about legacy, about how to distribute the estate properly." He paused. "I've been disappointed in some of your life choices." There it was. My jaw clenched. "You mean marrying someone you didn't approve of?" "I mean making decisions without considering the family's position. Your husband was a good man, I'm sure, but he came from nothing. Now you're raising Lucy on what? A part-time income? You're nearly 33 years old, and you're still asking us for help with rent." The shame burned in my chest, mixing with rage. "I'm doing my best. His death benefit wasn't enough to cover everything, and I'm trying to give Lucy stability." Exactly my point. Thomas finally turned to look at me. "I want to ensure Lucy isn't a drain on family resources going forward. I'm proposing a deal. Sign over your rights to any inheritance beyond a small trust for Lucy's education. In exchange, we'll make sure you have enough to live on." Modestly, I stared at him. "You want me to give up my inheritance?" "I want you to be realistic. Brittany has built a life. She married well. Craig is successful. She's raised her children properly. She deserves the lion's share of what I've built." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Craig has prepared papers. It's very simple. You sign, and we can all move forward. If you refuse, well, we've documented some concerning behaviors this week. Your instability, your paranoia. We'd hate to have to pursue emergency custody of Lucy, but we'd do what's necessary to protect her." My heart stopped. "Custody? You locked yourself in your room yesterday morning and wouldn't come out for hours. You've been erratic, emotional. Craig has statements from hotel staff about your behavior. We have documentation. If needed, we can prove you're unfit." The room incident. When I'd been frantically searching for my stolen belongings, they'd twisted it into evidence of instability. This is blackmail. This is family looking out for family. Thomas put the envelope in my hand. "Think about it. But don't think too long. We need an answer by tomorrow." I walked back to my room in a daze. When I got there, I found Lucy already in her pajamas, tucked into bed. Diane was sitting on the edge of the mattress, reading her a story. "Mom," I said carefully, "can we talk outside?" In the hallway, I tried one last time. "You can't be okay with this. Dad is threatening to take Lucy from me." Diane looked tired, older than her 64 years. "He's thinking about what's best for everyone. You have to understand, Megan. We worry about you. Ever since David died, you've been struggling. Maybe Lucy would be better off with more stability. I'm her mother. And no one's saying you're not. But Brittany has resources. She can provide things you can't. Diane touched my arm. Just sign the papers. Make this easier on everyone. She went back into the room, and I stood in that hallway, the same hallway where my daughter had sat crying and alone, and I realized my entire family had turned against me. But I wasn't going to give up. I went to the business center, the tiny room off the lobby with 2 computers. I had one shot. Before Brittany had taken my phone, before she'd changed my password, I'd managed to send one email to Jake, my late husband's brother. He lived in Oregon, worked in tech, and was the only person I could think of who might help. I'd written, "Something's wrong. Need you to look into Dad's finances. Trust me, we'll explain later." That had been 2 days ago. I hadn't heard back. But Jake was thorough. If anyone could find something useful, it was him. I just had to survive until he did. That night, I refused to sign the papers. I told Thomas I needed more time to read them, to understand what I was agreeing to. His face went cold. "You're making a mistake." The next morning, everything got worse. I woke up to find my phone buzzing. Brittany had given me back the password, which should have been my first warning. When I unlocked it, I saw dozens of emails, messages, notifications. My part-time job at the bookstore had sent a termination notice. Apparently, I'd sent them an email at 3 in the morning, full of profanity and bizarre accusations against my manager. The email said I quit, that I never wanted to work in such a toxic environment again. I never sent that email. My landlord had received notice that I was breaking my lease. The message, supposedly from me, said I'd found better housing and would be out by the end of the month. I never sent that either. When I checked my bank account, my stomach turned over. It had been drained. Every penny, gone. I called the bank from my phone, hands shaking. The representative explained that a cosigner had authorized the withdrawal. My father had been a cosigner since he'd helped me set up the account after David died, when I'd needed financial support. "But he can't just take everything," I said. "Actually, ma'am, as a cosigner, he has full access to the account. If you have a dispute, you'll need to resolve it directly with him." I hung up and ran to my parents' room, pounded on the door. Thomas opened it, already dressed for the day, coffee in hand. "Give me back my money. I moved it to a trust account for Lucy's benefit. You clearly can't manage finances responsibly." He said it so calmly, like he was explaining something to a child. "That's theft. That's protecting my granddaughter's future." He started to close the door, but I pushed forward. "I'm going to the police. I'm going to tell them everything." Craig appeared behind Thomas. "Tell them what, exactly? That your father, who is a cosigner on your account, moved money to protect his granddaughter? That your sister paid for a vacation and you're upset about room arrangements? That you're having financial troubles and your family is trying to help?" He smiled. "Go ahead. But while you're at it, we'll show them the documentation we have. The emails you sent, the statements from hotel staff, the concerning behavior." I backed away. I could barely breathe. Back in my room, I discovered more damage. My social media accounts had been hacked. Posts had gone up, rambling and paranoid, talking about how my family was trying to control me, how I couldn't trust anyone. My friends were commenting, asking if I was okay, if I needed help. But the posts made me look unhinged, unstable, exactly what they wanted. I spent the rest of the day trying to contain the damage. I called friends, tried to explain, but I could hear the doubt in their voices. I contacted my landlord, but the lease-breaking notice had been notarized. Someone had forged my signature. By evening, I got the worst news. A social worker from Child Protective Services called my phone. "Miss Anderson? This is Patricia Webb from CPS. We've received a report about your daughter, Lucy. Some concerning photos and information about her welfare. We need to schedule a home visit as soon as you return from your vacation." "What photos? Who reported me?" The report was anonymous, but it included images of your daughter left unsupervised in a hotel hallway for an extended period. "We take these matters very seriously." The staged photos. The ones Brittany had taken, that she'd somehow made look innocent. A little girl playing in a hallway, not a little girl locked out and abandoned. That's not what happened. My family did that to her. They locked her out. Ma'am, the report also mentioned potential mental health concerns. We'll need to assess the full situation. I'll be in touch about scheduling. She hung up. I sat on the floor of the hotel room, Lucy coloring beside me, oblivious to the disaster unfolding around us. In 4 days, my family had destroyed my job, my housing, my finances, and my reputation. They'd manufactured evidence of instability and weaponized it against me. And I'd played right into their hands by trying to fight back. That evening, Craig casually left his phone on the table during dinner. When I glanced at it, I saw messages between him and Brittany. They'd left it there deliberately, knowing I'd look. The messages laid it all out, the endgame. They didn't just want me to sign away my inheritance, they wanted full custody of Lucy. Not because they loved her, because David's construction company had a substantial death benefit for dependents. A trust fund worth over $200,000 that would be accessible when Lucy turned 18. If they had custody, they'd control that money. My daughter was a paycheck to them. The messages went on. They'd already filed preliminary custody paperwork. The court date was set for 6 days from now. They had statements from hotel staff, doctor's notes about my anxiety from a physician. Craig knew, fabricated evidence of my instability. I tried to make a deal. That night, after Lucy was asleep, I knocked on Brittany's door. "Fine," I said when she opened it. "I'll sign whatever you want. Just leave Lucy out of this." Brittany looked at Craig, and they both smiled. "Too late," Brittany said. "You had your chance. You proved you can't be trusted. You're erratic, unstable. You made this personal by refusing to cooperate." She leaned against the doorframe. "You should have just signed the papers when Dad asked nicely." "We want what's best for Lucy," Craig added. "And that's not living with someone who's having a mental breakdown." "I'm not having a breakdown. You're manufacturing all of this." "Are we?" Brittany held up her phone, recording. "Because right now, you're shouting in a hotel hallway at 11 o'clock at night, making wild accusations against your family who's only tried to help you. That seems pretty unstable to me." I backed away, realizing every word I said was being documented, twisted, and used against me. The next morning we drove home. 6 hours in their rental car, because I still didn't have my keys. Lucy sat between Brittany's kids in the back, and I was forced into the front passenger seat next to Thomas. The whole drive, I stared out the window, my mind racing. When we arrived at my parents' house, Thomas announced I'd be staying in their guest house until I stabilized. Lucy would stay in the main house where it's safe and comfortable. I had no choice. I had no money for a hotel, no car to leave, nowhere to go. That night, separated from my daughter for the first time, I lay awake in the guest house and tried to think of anyone who could help me, anyone who'd believe me. I reached out to old friends the next day using my phone. But Brittany had been thorough. She'd sent messages to everyone I knew, supposedly from me, saying cruel and bizarre things. My book club friends thought I'd had a breakdown. My college roommate stopped responding to my texts. Then I found a potential ally. Janet, a family friend I'd known since childhood, reached out. She said she'd heard I was going through a hard time and wanted to help. She offered to connect me with a lawyer, to be a character witness for me. I met her at a coffee shop and told her everything, the setup, the trap, the custody scheme, how they'd destroyed my life in less than a week. Janet listened sympathetically, took notes, and promised to help. 2 days later, I found out Janet had recorded our entire conversation. She'd been planted by Brittany. Every word I'd said about the conspiracy, about my family's plot, was handed over to CPS as evidence of my paranoid delusions. Janet gave a statement calling me unhinged and saying I was detached from reality. The CPS investigator, Patricia Webb, came for a home visit, except she visited my parents' house, where they'd set up a beautiful room for Lucy. Toys everywhere, clean clothes, healthy meals. My parents played the role of concerned grandparents perfectly. Then Patricia met with me in the guest house. I'd been so stressed I hadn't slept in days. I'd lost weight. My hands shook from anxiety. When I tried to explain what was really happening, I could hear how it sounded. Paranoid. Desperate. Patricia's report recommended supervised visitation only. The custody hearing was in 72 hours. My court-appointed lawyer was overwhelmed, juggling 50 cases at once. She barely had time to review my file. When I told her about the financial fraud, the setup, the manipulation, she looked exhausted. "Without proof, it's your word against theirs," she said. "And right now, they have documentation, and you have accusations." I spent those 3 days trying to build a case with nothing. No money for a private investigator. No evidence I could access. No allies who'd stand with me. Then came the restraining order. Thomas filed it, claiming I was a danger to Lucy. He cited an incident where I'd allegedly broken into the house. I'd used my key to try to see my daughter, and had been erratic and threatening. I was removed from the property, served with papers saying I couldn't come within 500 feet of Lucy until after the custody hearing. I sat in a public library that night, the only place I could go that was warm and free. I had $17 in my pocket, no home, no job, and no way to reach my daughter. I'd tried everything, and everything I tried had made it worse. I was at the library computer, logged into my email through a guest account, when a man approached me. "Megan Anderson?" I looked up, startled. He was a courier, holding an envelope. "This is for you. I was told I'd find you here." He handed me the envelope and left. Inside was a flash drive and a note in Jake's handwriting. From Jake. "Get to a library computer. Don't tell anyone. Trust me." My hands trembled as I plugged the flash drive into the computer. The flash drive contained hundreds of files. Financial records, emails, bank statements, corporate documents. At first, it was overwhelming, too much information to process. Then I started reading, and everything became clear. Jake had spent the last 5 days digging into my father's business history. What he'd found was damning. Thomas's telecommunications company hadn't been legitimately sold 4 years ago. He'd committed securities fraud, inflating the company's value through false reporting and fake contracts. He'd pocketed millions from investors while the company was actually failing. But it went deeper. After the sale, Thomas had been systematically moving money offshore through shell companies. Brittany and Craig were in on it, helping him hide assets to avoid estate taxes and potential liability from the fraud. The files showed everything: offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands, falsified tax returns, money laundering through real estate investments. They'd created an entire web of financial crimes over the past 4 years. If this got out, they'd all face federal charges. Prison time. Complete financial ruin. Jake had included a note explaining what he'd found. He'd worked with a forensic accountant friend, someone who specialized in white-collar crime. Everything was documented, verified, and ready to be handed to authorities. I copied everything to a backup email account. Then I sat there in the library, my mind racing. This was leverage. Real leverage. I could threaten to expose them, force them to drop the custody case, return my money, and leave me alone. But I had to be smart about it. I couldn't make the same mistakes as before. I called my father from the library's courtesy phone. "We need to meet," I said, "tonight. At the house. I have something you need to see." His voice was cautious. "What is this about?" "Just be there. You, Brittany, and Craig. 9 o'clock. I technically wasn't supposed to go to the house because of the restraining order, but I was desperate. This was my only shot. At 9 o'clock, I walked up to my childhood home carrying my laptop with Jake's files loaded. My father opened the door, and behind him stood Brittany and Craig, both looking smug. "This better be good," Brittany said. "Or you're going to jail for violating a restraining order." I set up my laptop on the dining room table and pulled up the files. "I know about the securities fraud, Dad. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the money laundering and the tax evasion." I turned the laptop toward them. "I have every single document, every bank statement, every shell company, every fraudulent transaction from the past 4 years." The color drained from Thomas's face. Craig stepped forward, squinting at the screen. "Where did you get this?" "Doesn't matter. What matters is what I do with it." I looked at each of them. "You dropped the custody case. You return my money. You leave Lucy and me alone. Or I take all of this to the FBI tomorrow morning. I expected panic, negotiation, some kind of fear response. Instead, Thomas sat down slowly, his face calculating. Brittany and Craig exchanged a look, and then Craig actually laughed. You really think you're clever, don't you? Craig said. He pulled out his own laptop and opened it. If you expose us, we take Lucy down with us. He turned his screen toward me. It showed documents, bank statements, emails, all with my name on them, my signatures, my supposed authorizations for various transactions in the shell companies. We've been preparing for this possibility for a while, Craig said. You were the mastermind, Megan, angry at your father after your husband died, bitter about not getting enough support. So you stole from the family. You created the shell companies. You moved the money. That's insane. I didn't do any of that. The documents say you did. Brittany smiled. We've been very careful. Your signatures are perfect. The paper trail leads directly to you. If you go to the authorities, you'll be arrested for fraud. Multiple felonies. You'll face prison. Thomas leaned forward. And while you're in jail, Lucy will go into foster care, because all of us will be implicated and unavailable as guardians. Is that what you want? Your daughter in the system because you were vindictive? The room spun. They'd anticipated this move. They'd prepared for it. They'd created a counter-trap that would destroy me and leave Lucy completely alone. You're bluffing, I said, but my voice shook. Are we? Craig pulled up more files. Detailed forgeries of my involvement in every crime. I'm a lawyer, Megan. I know how to build a case. And this one is airtight. If you expose us, you go down first and hardest. I grabbed my laptop and stood up. Then I'll go public. Media, social media. I'll tell everyone what you did. And we'll sue you for defamation, Craig said calmly. And use your very public breakdown as further evidence that you're unfit. The custody hearing is in 2 days. The judge will see a desperate woman making wild accusations with no proof, because all the proof points to you as the criminal. Brittany stood up and walked over to me. You should have just signed the papers when we first asked. You could have kept some dignity. Now you're going to lose everything. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Within an hour, police arrived at the house. They arrested me for violating the restraining order. But that wasn't all. Craig had also filed charges for attempted extortion, claiming I'd threatened to make false accusations unless they paid me money. At the police station, they set my bail impossibly high. Craig had connections with the judge who set it. $50,000. I didn't have $50. I sat in a holding cell, and the reality crashed over me. The custody hearing was in 48 hours. I wouldn't be able to attend. I'd be in jail. Lucy would be given to Brittany by default. The evidence Jake had found was useless. If I used it, I'd destroy myself. I'd fought back, and it had cost me everything. They let me make one phone call. I called Jake. It's over, I said, my voice hollow. They have forgeries making it look like I did everything. If I expose them, I go to prison, and Lucy goes into foster care. Jake was quiet for a long moment. Are you sure? I'm sure. They planned for this. They have fake documents with my name all over them. I closed my eyes. Do it anyway. Release everything to the FBI. I don't care what happens to me. Just make sure they can't hurt anyone else. Please. Megan, if I do this, you might go to prison. I'm already losing Lucy. At least this way, they won't have her either. At least they'll pay for what they've done. Tears ran down my face. Please, Jake. For David. For Lucy. Do it. He was quiet, then said, Okay, I'll do it. But Megan, give me a little time to do this right. I need to verify some things with my contact. Trust me. They moved me to county jail the next day. I sat in a cell with 3 other women, trying not to fall apart completely. The custody hearing was tomorrow. My public defender had given up on building any real defense. The outcome was predetermined. I'd lost. The custody hearing happened without me. I appeared via video link, sitting in an orange jumpsuit, looking exactly like what they'd painted me to be, a criminal, an unfit mother. My public defender made a half-hearted argument. She had nothing to work with, no evidence, no witnesses. Just my word against a mountain of documentation showing my instability, my erratic behavior, my supposed crimes. Diane testified first, crying about her daughter's mental deterioration. I've watched her spiral since David died. She won't accept help. She makes wild accusations. I'm terrified for Lucy's safety. Thomas presented himself as the concerned patriarch, disappointed in his daughter, but committed to protecting his granddaughter. We've tried everything to help Megan. She needs professional help, not custody of a child. Brittany was perfect on the stand, composed, loving, successful. Lucy is thriving with us. She feels safe. She's happy. I don't want to take her from Megan permanently, but right now, Megan can't provide stability. Then Lucy was brought into chambers to speak with the judge privately. I couldn't hear what she said, but I knew Brittany had been coaching her for days, bribing her with toys, manipulating her with kindness. When my turn came, I tried to explain. The setup, the trap, the financial crimes. But with each word, I could see the judge's expression shift. Skeptical, concerned. I sounded exactly like what they'd said I was, paranoid and delusional. The judge's preliminary ruling was swift. Temporary custody to Brittany and Craig, pending my psychiatric evaluation and proof of stability. Supervised visits once monthly, until further notice. I'd lost Lucy. They released me from jail the next afternoon. The restraining order violation charges were dropped as a family misunderstanding now that custody was resolved. The extortion charges were suspended, contingent on my cooperation and getting mental health treatment. I walked out of county jail with the clothes on my back and $37 someone had left in my property bag. I had no home, no job, no car, no phone, and my daughter was gone. I went to a public library and used their computer to check email. Jake had sent multiple messages, but I'd had no way to receive them. The subject line of his most recent email made my heart stop. It's done. I opened it. Megan, I'm sorry it took so long. I had to do this right. The evidence has been submitted to the FBI. They've been investigating for 3 days. There should be news soon. I'm sorry I couldn't move faster. Hold on. I searched online for news about my family. At first, nothing. Then I found it. Federal investigators had raided Thomas Anderson's residence and business offices early that morning. Criminal charges filed for securities fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. 3 individuals arrested: Thomas Anderson, Brittany Thompson, and Craig Thompson. It was everywhere. Local news, financial news. The case was huge because of the amount of money involved and the elaborate scheme. Jake hadn't just turned over documents. He'd given them to the FBI with complete forensic analysis. The investigation had been happening in secret while I was in jail, suffering, thinking I'd lost everything. They'd needed time to verify everything, to build an airtight case, to coordinate with federal prosecutors. And now it was done. I read article after article, my hands shaking. The charges were serious. If convicted, they faced decades in prison, asset seizure, complete financial ruin. But there was a problem. Lucy had been present during the raid. The news reports mentioned that minor children were temporarily placed in emergency foster care while the investigation proceeded. Lucy was in the system now. Strangers were caring for her, and I still had a custody order against me. I had to get to her, but I didn't even know where she was. I spent what little money I had on a bus ticket to the courthouse. I found my public defender in her office, buried under paperwork. "You need to file an emergency motion," I said. The custody order was based on lies. The people who have custody are arrested federal criminals. Lucy needs to come home. My lawyer looked at me with something like pity. "It's not that simple, Megan. You still have the CPS investigation, the psychiatric evaluation requirement. Even with your family arrested, you need to prove you can provide a stable home. I didn't do anything wrong. They set me up. I believe you. But the system moves slowly. Give me a few days to file the right motions. I didn't have a few days. Lucy was with strangers, confused and scared, probably thinking I'd abandoned her. Then came the worst part. Craig's lawyer, even from jail, released a statement to the media. It claimed that Megan Anderson had orchestrated the exposure of the family's crimes as revenge. It referenced the forged documents showing my supposed involvement. It painted me as vindictive and unstable. Some media outlets picked it up. The narrative shifted. Maybe I was the real criminal. Maybe I'd framed my own family out of spite. Online comments were brutal. Half thought I was a victim. Half thought I was a monster. My face was everywhere. I couldn't walk down the street without people recognizing me as that woman from the news. I had no money for a hotel. I slept in the library during the day and walked around at night because there was nowhere else to go. I ate from dollar menus when I could afford it. 3 days after the arrests, I finally got a call from CPS on the library's courtesy phone. Patricia Webb, the investigator. Miss Anderson, Lucy is asking for you. She's very distressed. Given the change in circumstances, we're willing to arrange a supervised visit. I'm her mother. I should have her back. There are procedures. The custody order is still in effect. We need time to sort through everything. But yes, we can arrange a visit. The visit was in a sterile CPS office. Lucy sat at a small table with crayons and paper, a social worker nearby. When she saw me, she burst into tears and ran over. "Mommy, where were you? Why did the police come? Where's Aunt Brittany? Everyone's gone and I don't understand." I held her, trying to stay calm, trying not to cry. "I'm sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. I'm going to fix this, okay? I'm going to bring you home." But even as I said it, I didn't know how. The visit lasted 30 minutes. When they took her back to foster care, Lucy screamed for me. The sound of her crying followed me out of the building and haunted me for days. I was at my absolute lowest point. My daughter was gone. My reputation was destroyed. I had nothing. Then, sitting on a bench outside a convenience store, eating a $3 sandwich that would be my only meal that day, someone sat down next to me. It was Jake. He'd flown in from Oregon. He handed me a phone, a credit card, and an address written on paper. "I rented you an apartment for 3 months, paid up front. Small place, but it's clean and safe. The phone has a prepaid plan. The card has $5,000 on it. It's all I could manage right now, but it's a start." I started crying, actually sobbing. The first kindness I'd experienced in weeks. "Why are you helping me?" Jake looked out at the parking lot. "Because David would have. Because your family, and because what they did to you was evil." He turned to me. "Now we fight back properly. I've found you a lawyer. She's willing to work on contingency because she thinks we have a case. Her name is Amanda Sterling. I can't afford a lawyer. You're not paying. She believes in your case. And I got you a criminal defense attorney too, for the fraud accusations. His name is Robert Chen. He's reviewing those forged documents and says he can prove they're fake." I couldn't speak. I just held the phone and the card like they were lifelines. "It's not over, Megan," Jake said. "The hardest part is just beginning. But you're not alone anymore." Amanda Sterling was nothing like my overwhelmed public defender. She was sharp, focused, and angry on my behalf. When I met her in her office 2 days later, she'd already reviewed my case file. "This is one of the most egregious cases of parental manipulation I've ever seen," she said. "We're going to destroy their entire custody case. But it's going to take a few weeks to build properly." "Weeks? Lucy's in foster care right now." "I know, and I'm going to file for emergency custody modification today. But Megan, you need to understand something. Even though your family has been arrested, the custody order against you still stands. We need to prove you can provide a stable home. That means you need a job, a home, and you need to pass the psychiatric evaluation." Over the next 2 weeks, I rebuilt my life piece by piece. Jake helped me get a job at a restaurant where his friend managed. It was waiting tables, but it was income. I took the psychiatric evaluation with a neutral doctor. She found no evidence of mental illness, instability, or parenting concerns. Her report completely contradicted everything the court had been told. Amanda filed motion after motion. She got the hotel security footage from the resort, footage that had been overlooked. It showed Lucy being physically pushed out of the room and the door locked. It showed her sitting there crying for hours. It showed me finding her and being blocked by Brittany. She got text messages between Brittany and Craig that had been recovered in the FBI's investigation. Messages planning the entire setup, discussing how to manipulate the custody case, laughing about how easy it was to fool me. She got statements from Janet, the fake friend, who flipped once she realized she could face charges for her role in the conspiracy. Janet admitted Brittany had paid her $5,000 to befriend me and record our conversations. She exposed the CPS investigators' conflict of interest. The donation my father had made to the charity Patricia Webb worked with was documented. Patricia was removed from the case, and a new investigator reviewed everything with fresh eyes. Robert Chen, my criminal defense attorney, hired forensic document experts. They analyzed the forged papers claiming I was involved in the financial crimes. The experts proved the documents were recently created, with digital signatures copied and pasted, with metadata showing they were made after the FBI investigation began. The fraud case against me collapsed. All charges dropped. The media narrative started to shift. A local investigative journalist did a deep dive into the case, exposing how an innocent mother had been systematically destroyed by her own family. The public turned in my favor, but the most important evidence came from an unexpected source. Craig's own children, Mason and Harper, were interviewed by the new CPS investigator. They'd been living with Craig's parents since the arrests, and without Brittany and Craig's influence, they told the truth. They described how Aunt Megan's things had been stolen, how they'd overheard adults planning to make her look crazy, how Lucy had cried in the hallway, and everyone had laughed about it, how their mother had coached Lucy on what to say to judges. The kids' statements were damning. 4 weeks after the FBI arrests, we had an emergency custody hearing. This time, I had real representation. Amanda presented everything methodically: the security footage, the text messages, the recantations, the expert testimony, the children's statements. She built an overwhelming case that the original custody order had been obtained through fraud and manipulation. The judge was visibly disturbed as she reviewed the evidence. "Miss Anderson," the judge said, "I owe you an apology. This court was deceived. The custody order is hereby vacated. Full custody is returned to you immediately." I actually collapsed. Amanda had to hold me up. Lucy was brought to the courthouse that same day. When she saw me, she ran across the room and I caught her, holding her so tight I thought I might never let go. "Mummy, you came back." "I never left, baby. I was always fighting to get back to you, always." That night, in our small apartment, I tucked Lucy into her new bed. Jake had helped furnish the place with basics. It wasn't much, but it was ours. Safe, free from manipulation. "Mommy, are Grandma and Grandpa bad people?" Lucy asked. I thought about how to answer that. They made very bad choices. They hurt people. And sometimes, when people hurt us, we have to stay away from them, even if they're family. What about Aunt Brittany? Especially Aunt Brittany. Lucy was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad we're together again." "Me too, baby. Me too." But it wasn't over yet. The criminal trials were coming. The federal trial for Thomas, Brittany, and Craig took 6 months to prepare. The prosecution's case was overwhelming. The forensic accountant who'd helped Jake testified about the intricate fraud scheme. Bank records showed millions moved illegally. Investors who'd lost money testified about the lies they'd been told. But the defense tried one last manipulation. Brittany's lawyer painted her as a victim of her controlling father. She claimed she'd just followed his orders, that she didn't understand the financial crimes. She cried on the stand about how she loved her family and never meant to hurt anyone. Her lawyer tried to paint me as the aggressor. Megan Anderson has pursued this vendetta with single-minded determination. She's turned children against their parents. She's destroyed a family out of spite. I sat in the gallery watching, Lucy at home with a babysitter, and I thought about that moment on the beach when my father had offered me the deal. How different things might have been if I'd just given up, signed away my rights, and let them win. But I'd fought. and the fight had nearly destroyed me. The prosecution called me as a witness. I told my story plainly. The hotel room incident, the theft of my belongings, the systematic destruction of my life, the custody scheme. "Why didn't you just sign the papers they wanted?" the prosecutor asked. "Because they were wrong. Because my daughter deserved better. Because giving in to bullies never makes them stop." I looked directly at my family in the defendant's chairs. "Because I'm her mother, and I don't give up." The jury deliberated for 3 days. Guilty on all counts, all 3 defendants. Thomas was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and ordered to pay millions in restitution. His health was declining, and at 76, 8 years might be a life sentence. Craig got 6 years and disbarment from practicing law. His legal career was over. Brittany got 4 years. Her children, Mason and Harper, would be teenagers by the time she got out. Craig's parents were raising them, and they were getting therapy to process everything. Diane, my mother, had cooperated with authorities and testified against Thomas. She avoided jail time, but lost everything financially. She moved to a small apartment in another state. She sent me one letter, apologizing for enabling the abuse. I read it once and never responded. The civil suits came next. The investors Thomas had defrauded filed claims. The estate was liquidated, every asset seized. But there was one thing they couldn't touch. Lucy's trust fund, from David's death benefit, was protected. It was in her name, untouchable by their legal judgments. That money would still be there for her college, her future. Amanda Sterling helped me file a civil suit against the family for damages. Emotional distress, lost wages, pain and suffering. We won a judgment for $250,000, though collecting it would take years as everything was tied up in restitution payments. Jake and I became Lucy's family. We spent holidays together. He flew down to visit every few months. He helped with homework over video calls. He was the uncle she needed. I went back to school online, finishing my degree in social work. I wanted to help other people who'd been trapped by family manipulation. I wanted to turn my nightmare into something useful. The blog I started about my experience went viral. Hundreds of people reached out, sharing their own stories of family abuse, gaslighting, and custody manipulation. I realized how common it was, how many people suffered in silence because no one would believe them. I started speaking at conferences about family court reform and how easily the system could be weaponized. Lucy slowly healed. The trauma of what happened would always be part of her story. But she was resilient. She had friends. She loved school. She drew pictures and played soccer, and was learning piano. One night, about a year after everything ended, Lucy asked me about her grandparents. Will I ever see them again? I thought carefully. Maybe when you're older, if you want to. But not until you're ready, and only if you choose to. Do you think they're sorry? I don't know, baby. Sometimes people don't know how to be sorry for the hurt they cause. She nodded, processing that. I'm glad you didn't give up on me. Never. Not ever. 2 years later, Lucy and I were thriving in ways I'd never imagined possible during those dark days. We'd moved to a better apartment, and I'd advanced in my job at a nonprofit helping families navigate the court system. The work was hard, but meaningful. Every parent I helped felt like a small victory against everything my family had tried to do. Lucy was 8 now, confident and happy. She'd made new friends, and her teacher said she was one of the most empathetic kids in her class. She wanted to be a veterinarian when she grew up, and she volunteered at an animal shelter on weekends. Jake got married, and Lucy was a flower girl at his wedding. We spent Thanksgiving with his family in Oregon, surrounded by people who chose to love us. The criminal restitution payments meant I received small amounts of money periodically. I put it all into a savings account for Lucy's future. It would never make up for what they'd taken, but it was something. I'd learned so much through everything that happened, lessons that had cost me dearly but had made me stronger. First, I learned to trust my instincts. When my family treated Lucy badly, I'd known something was wrong. But I doubted myself because they were family, because they had money and status, because I'd been taught to defer to their authority. I should have protected her and myself the moment they locked her out of that hotel room. Second, I learned that documentation is everything. The single email I'd sent to Jake before they took my phone had saved us. The security footage I'd thought to preserve had vindicated us. In situations of abuse and manipulation, evidence is survival. Third, I learned that real family isn't defined by blood. Jake, who was technically just my late husband's brother, had been more family than my own parents. He'd risked his time, his money, and his reputation to help me. The friends I'd made through support groups and my work, the colleagues who stood by me, they were my real family now. Fourth, I learned that fighting back doesn't mean being loud or aggressive. The most effective resistance was patient, strategic, and thorough. I hadn't won by shouting or making scenes. I'd won by gathering evidence, building a case, and letting the truth speak for itself. Fifth, I learned to protect the vulnerable at all costs. Even when it looked like I'd lose everything, even when exposing them meant risking prison, I'd chosen to protect Lucy from a lifetime of abuse. That choice had led to the darkest period of my life, but it was the right choice. Sixth, I learned that justice takes time. The weeks I'd spent homeless, jobless, and separated from Lucy had felt eternal. But justice was moving, slowly and methodically, in the background. The FBI investigation, the document analysis, the witness interviews, they all took time. Patience and faith in the process had been agonizing, but necessary. Finally, I learned that surviving isn't the same as thriving. Surviving was getting through each day after they'd destroyed my life. Thriving was building something better, something real, something that couldn't be taken away by people who valued money over love. One evening, Lucy and I were making dinner together in our kitchen. She was chattering about her day at school, and I was listening while chopping vegetables. The normalcy of it, the peace, felt like a miracle. "Mommy," Lucy said suddenly, "remember when we stayed at that hotel and Aunt Brittany was mean to me?" "I remember. I was really scared that day. But you made it okay." She hugged my waist. "You always make things okay." I set down the knife and hugged her back, my throat tight. "That's my job, baby. And I take it very seriously." She pulled back and smiled up at me. "I know. You're the best at it." Later that night, after Lucy was asleep, I sat at my laptop and wrote a new blog post. The blog had become a resource for hundreds of people going through similar situations. I got messages weekly from mothers facing custody manipulation, from people trapped by family abuse, from anyone who needed to know they weren't alone. I wrote about how the hardest part wasn't the legal battles or the financial devastation. It was the moment when you realize the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally are capable of cruelty beyond imagination. It was the grief of losing family not to death, but to their own choices. But I also wrote about hope, about rebuilding, about the strength you don't know you have until you're forced to find it. The post ended with a question I always asked. When someone shows you who they really are, do you believe them? Or do you keep giving them chances to hurt you? I believed them now. And I'd never give them another chance. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. "How are my favorite people?" I sent back a photo of Lucy sleeping peacefully, her stuffed animals tucked around her. He replied with a heart emoji, and, "You did good, Megan. David would be proud." I thought about David often. How he would have fought alongside me. How he never would have let anyone treat Lucy that way. His death had left a hole in our lives, but his brother had stepped up in ways I'd never expected. 6 months later, I got an invitation in the mail. It was to speak at a national conference on family law reform. They wanted me to share my story, to talk about how the system had failed me and how it needed to change. I almost said no. The thought of standing in front of hundreds of people and reliving the worst period of my life was terrifying. But then I thought about all the messages I'd received. The mothers who'd found my blog and realized they weren't crazy. The fathers fighting against parental alienation. The grandparents shut out of their grandchildren's lives by vindictive ex-spouses. The children trapped in abusive situations because the court believed the wrong parent. I said yes. At the conference, I told my story from start to finish. I showed the security footage of Lucy locked out of that hotel room. I showed the text messages planning my destruction. I explained how easily the system had been weaponized against me. The family court system is supposed to protect children, I said. But without proper safeguards, it can be manipulated by people who care more about money and control than love. We need reform. We need better training for judges and social workers to recognize manipulation tactics. We need faster response times for emergency situations. We need to believe victims when they come forward with evidence. The room was silent when I finished. Then someone started clapping, and soon the entire auditorium was on their feet. Afterwards, dozens of people came up to share their own stories. Lawyers, social workers, parents, all committed to making the system better. That night, I called Lucy from my hotel room. She was staying with Jake and his wife for the weekend. "How was your speech, Mommy?" "It was good, baby. Really good." "Did you tell them about the hotel?" "I did." "Good. Maybe it'll help other kids like me." At 8 years old, she understood that our pain could have purpose, that survived trauma could be transformed into advocacy. When I got home, there was a letter in my mailbox. The return address made my stomach drop. It was from Brittany, from federal prison. I almost threw it away without opening it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single handwritten page. "Megan, I know you'll probably never read this. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I've had a lot of time to think about what we did to you and Lucy. I was wrong. I was greedy and jealous and cruel. I destroyed your life because I couldn't stand that you might be happy even though you didn't have money. I wanted you to suffer. And then it became about covering up Dad's crimes and protecting myself. Every choice I made was about me, never about what was right. You were a good mother and I tried to take that from you. I'm sorry. I know that word is inadequate. I know I can't undo the damage. But I needed to say it. Mason and Harper are growing up without me, and they're better off for it. I was a terrible role model. Craig's parents are giving them the love and stability I never could. When I get out, I don't know what kind of relationship I'll have with them. Maybe none. Maybe that's what I deserve. You won. Not because you were vindictive, but because you were right. I hope Lucy is happy. I hope you both are. I hope someday you can forgive me, even though I don't deserve it. Brittany. I read it 3 times. It was the first time any member of my family had genuinely apologized. The first time any of them had acknowledged the truth of what they'd done. Part of me wanted to write back. To accept the apology. To offer some kind of forgiveness. But another part of me knew that forgiveness wasn't owed. That some things were too broken to fix. That moving forward didn't require reconciliation with people who tried to destroy you. I put the letter in a box with all the other documents from that period of my life. Legal papers, court transcripts, news articles, evidence. Someday, when Lucy was older, I'd let her read it all if she wanted to. She deserved to know the full truth of her family history. For now, I focused on the life we were building. 3 years after everything ended, I completed my master's degree in social work. Jake and his wife flew down for my graduation. Lucy wore a new dress and cheered when I walked across the stage. I'd started a small consulting business, helping lawyers identify manipulation tactics in custody cases. The work was rewarding, and it paid well enough that we could afford a small house with a yard. Lucy got a dog, a golden retriever mix she named Buddy. Life was ordinary in the best possible way. School concerts and soccer games, birthday parties and summer camps, homework battles and bedtime stories. The simple, beautiful routine of being a mother to a happy child. One night, as I tucked Lucy in, she said something that made my heart full. "Mommy, Sarah at school said her aunt gave her $100 for her birthday. And I said my Uncle Jake gave me a new bike and taught me how to ride it, and that's way better than money. It is way better. Sarah said her family is really rich, but I told her we're rich in different ways." She smiled up at me. "We're rich in love." "Yes, we are, baby. We really are." As I turned out the light and closed her door, I thought about the question I'd been asked at the conference. Was it worth it? Going through all that pain? The answer was complicated. I wished none of it had happened. I wished Lucy had never been traumatized. I wished I hadn't lost months of my life to fear and desperation. But I'd learned who I really was. I'd learned what I was capable of enduring and overcoming. I'd learned the difference between family who loves you and family who uses you. And I'd learned that fighting for what's right, even when it costs everything, is always worth it in the end. The room wasn't just for family that day in the hotel. It was for people who valued status and money over human decency. Real family, I'd discovered, doesn't lock out 6-year-olds, or manipulate custody systems, or destroy lives for inheritance money. Real family fights for you, protects you, stands with you, even when it's hard. Jake was family. The friends I'd made through my advocacy work were family. The community I'd built around my blog and speaking engagements was family. And Lucy and I, together in our little house with our golden retriever and our ordinary beautiful life, we were family. That was all we needed. So I'll ask you this. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who was supposed to love you? Have you ever had to choose between keeping the peace and protecting what matters most? What would you do if your own family turned against you? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button. It helps more people find these stories and know they're not alone. And if you want to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal and finding strength you didn't know you had, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. Someone who's fighting their own battles and needs to know that victory is possible. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being part of this community. Thank you for believing that truth matters, that justice is worth fighting for, and that love, real love, always wins in the end. To everyone out there fighting their own battles, keep going, document everything, trust your instincts, protect the vulnerable, and remember that the darkest hour comes right before dawn. You're stronger than you think. You're not alone, and you deserve to win. Take care of yourselves and each other. Until next time.